Hello all, this is Lace on Race. I'm Lace, the Executive Director of the Center for Racial Equity, and here to give you part two of 49 years after the decision of Roe v. Wade. Where are we now? Yesterday, we talked about the general possibilities, the part one, the introduction to how we can look at Roe through both a sociological as well as an ethical, and most crucially, through a racial lens. What we can do about all of this, not necessarily how to think, but an entreaty, an exhortation towards thinking. And this is where part two of our conversation comes in. Panic is a privilege. What do I mean when I say that panic is a privilege? It means particularly this, that super hyper boiling emotion, while absolutely justified, I feel it too. I feel it too. But super activated emotion that flames out and fizzles is a privilege. Now, I don't think that it's necessarily going to happen in this case in the same way that it happened in the Black Spring of 2020 or even the Civil Rights era of 1954 to some might say the late 1980s to early 1990s. I do think that it's going to have durability and staying power, if for no other reason but that white people are affected by it. They feel that they have skin in the game, that they are not at best active participants, but at worst passive observers. They do feel now that it feels very close to the bone and quite, dare I say, quite personal, that it is indeed something that is worth putting efforts and resources into. And part of that is the activation, is the high blood pressure raising that we're seeing now. And again, it's justified. Even though we had the only seemingly maybe it's going to happen in May, we knew what the writing was going to be on the wall. We didn't know how bad it would be. We didn't know that Alito would go even further than he did in May. But no one who saw that, who had been following the Supreme Court, could say with any sort of a clarity that they were particularly surprised by the decision. I think that they were surprised, and they should have been, by the virulence of the decision, particularly Justice Clarence Thomas's lone opinion that buttressed and affirmed the opinion of the majority, but went even further. There are some lessons to be learned with Clarence Thomas that I'm not sure I have the stomach to elucidate upon today. But I'll just throw out a few. Not all skin folk are kinfolk. But I think about him and his wife, and he and his wife together, I feel such a heavy weight that, oh, good Lord, I can't even talk about it. I will write about the conundrum that is Clarence Thomas. I'll leave that for another day, for another time, because we could really go down that rabbit hole. But I do think that there is something beyond a sadness there, and to be enraged by it is not only justified, it is actually to be expected, and I would worry about your pulse if you weren't. But even so, movement change of any stripe, any social change, might start with a flame, but ends in a hot pot. Not necessarily a simmer where you can barely feel the pulse at all, but also not in terms of 800 degrees and the pot itself melts. We need to be able to, more than any other time, and this is something I've been saying for 5 years, that other thinkers and commentators have been saying for 5 years, we need to know when to move, when to have our fast twitch muscles, and when to have our endurance muscles. And this is going to be a fight of endurance. Best case scenario, from both my thinking on the subject and what I've been reading for the last 24 hours, is that even if we are able to regain or retain what we thought we had in Roe, it's going to be anywhere from 5 years, if we're lucky, if we keep a if we keep so many ifs. It could also take 20 to 30 years. A Supreme Court decision that happened when I was 10 years old, almost 10, 1973. I was 9 going on 10 when it came out. And then 49 years later, here I am, almost 59, and it's not even eroded, honey, it's gone. It could take, realistically, another 20, 30, 40, even 50 years to get what we lost. People are going to have to learn how to build up their core muscles, how to build up their ability to talk well without the emotion that is the sole domain of the privilege, without the panic and the attendant fear-mongering that can go. Now we can talk about fear-mongering for a moment, because I just read an article in The Atlantic by Margaret Atwood, and I'll link it below if you want me to. And she was talking about how, even though she eventually published The Handmaid's Tale back in 1985, 12 years, a mere 12 years after Roe v. Wade, she put it on the shelf a number of times. For this reason. She thought it was implausible. She thought that people would read this and say, this is just over the top, Margaret. I mean, you're taking it too far. Yesterday, in the article that she wrote as a response to Roe v. Wade, she says she didn't take it far enough. Because what she did was she scared people, but she scared people into a certain complacency. This could never happen. This is so far-fetched, so beyond the pale, that it could never happen. So people looked at it as dystopian fiction, but they could never really see the idea that America could come close to the America that Atwood described. And here we are. So she was able to scare you, kind of like Stephen King can scare you, but not enough to get mobilized in a deep way. This is still better than what's happened in terms of racial justice over the last 65 years in the modern civil rights era, where white people weren't even scared. They were sometimes activated, sometimes pissed, sometimes angry, sometimes concerned. They were never really scared. They were never really scared because they knew that the worst things that could happen to black and brown people might sideswipe them a little bit, but their lives were going to be more or less the same. And they certainly didn't even want to talk about the good things that could happen from pro-black and brown legislation and policy that benefited them the most, like affirmative action. That's a conversation we can't have. But affirmative action has seen the biggest beneficiary be white women. That was true from the very beginning. We also don't want to talk about erosion. There has been steady erosion of Roe v. Wade, no matter what you think about it. There has been an erosion. The restrictions that were placed upon it, and not just the super harsh ones of the last 5 years or so, but almost as soon as it was on the books, people were trying to undermine it and tear it down. That's the same thing that happened in post-slavery where you had Reconstruction, and then the clawback. Then we'll talk about this in the series on emancipation and Juneteenth, but I think it's important to make these connections. In the clawback that happened post-Reconstruction and into the Ku Klux Klan and Jim Crow era that only subsided partially in the modern civil rights era, and the minute that happened, there were clawbacks and pushbacks as well. That is one thing that white people really need to learn. We're going to talk about the fact that, nothing is settled law, although it's not on my list down here. I need to put it on here. That nothing is settled law. And that the minute you think that it's settled, that there's nothing else to fight for, is the moment that erosion, becomes an avalanche. If you are lulled into believing, or if you yourself choose to believe because the alternative is just too much to bear, you are automatically susceptible to it. And for those of us, and I count myself here, for those of us with privilege, to think that it's too much to bear is a flex, is one big flex. Whenever I think about things that I don't want to think about, or that I can throw money at, and it alleviates and mitigates harm for myself and for my cohort, is the moment that I am allowing and displacing the disproportionate harm that will be visited by those people who are not by any means lower than I am in terms of humanity, but are definitely lower on various scales: income, education, social capital, you name it, and particularly race. This is a big deal. So, panic is a privilege. Perseverance is a virtue. Grandiosity, everyone talking about what they're willing to do. All of these people who are saying, I have a spare couch and a spare room, and if anybody wants to go on a camping trip, or if anybody wants to go to the museum in my city, that is great. But most people know that they're never going to have to make good on it. And so even though we're going to have a conversation about good performative and funky performative, that can be a funky act. Here's why. And this does not go into my panic is a privilege, but I think it's important now that it's on my head. A lot of times when people talk about they are willing to extend themselves, almost by definition, they're thinking about two very neatly defined and very easy to love cohorts. I saw that in myself as a substance abuse counselor. If people think, yes, I will open my home and my couch and I will drive you to the museum, is going to be a scared, doe-eyed, pretty girl from a cornfield in Nebraska, or a shamefaced woman with downcast eyes will take whatever you give them. And then you actually make good on your promise, and she turns out to be brash. She turns out to be not the sort of person that you would ask to lunch, and here she is, camped out on your couch for the next week and a half. Are you sure? Are you sure? Are you sure? When I think about this, I think about the scripture that I sometimes don't care for very much, which is caring for the least of these. Let's change out that language that I hate and talk about caring for the marginalized, caring for the people that society throws away. It very well may be that the person who needs to camp out on your couch is a sex worker who might still be doing sex work on your couch because that's how she makes her money. It may very well be that this person who you are allowing into your bedroom and driving hither and yon to museums already has 5 kids and they need to stay with her too. Maybe this person comes with requirements. This person who should be grateful for whatever you give them are the ones that are going to have the most requirements, right? They're going to be the ones that's like, oh, I'm gluten-free, and oh my God, this is the toothpaste, I only use Crest, you have Colgate. Because people who you are helping are not supposed to have demands. And so here you are schlepping to Walgreens at 10 p.m., getting her Crest instead of Colgate, and how dare she? She should be grateful you did anything at all. If you do that. Because again, we're talking about hypotheticals here. But the big overarching point that I'm trying to make is if you cannot close your eyes and extrapolate the cohort that you would find hardest to love, and that's a tough conversation you're going to have with yourself. If she cannot be on your couch, then you need to walk that back. You need to delete that meme off of Facebook saying that any and all takers are welcome to your love seat. Because that's usually not true. Let me tell you about the example that I have from my experience as a substance abuse counselor. You want to talk about both romanticizing and fetishizing. I thought that when I went into substance abuse work that I would get those downcast women in cardigan sweaters, and their eyes are downcast, and they're trying their best, and they're so grateful for anything I did. Oh, and everything I would say would be pearls, and they would take it to heart. And in 6 weeks, oh my gosh, they would have a really good but modest job as somewhere, and they would thank me, and they would send me like thank you letters and home baked goods. Or conversely, they would be young people who were just too clever by half, too brash by half, and I would be both authoritative and young at heart enough so that I would be able to connect with them. And the next thing you know, they have their PhDs in some money-making field. And of course, when they wrote their first book, they would name me. That is not the population that I got. I got people who were mandated to be there. I got people who weren't sure that they wanted someone of my skin persuasion to be the person that has any sort of power or influence over whether or not they get their driver's license back. There were people who substituted one substance for another, or substance addiction for a behavioral addiction like shopping or alcohol. And there would be people who would come in, and 5, 6, 7 relapses later, or they'd just phone it in. Or they'd be rich, and they would think I have nothing to say to them. It's like, I saw your 13-year-old car in the parking lot. I drive an E-Class. What do you have to say to me? I needed to love every single one of them. I needed to love them into a place where they would be able to collaborate with me. I needed to see them neither as romanticized figures where I'm idealizing them, or demonized figures where I'm denigrating them. So neither adulation nor contempt, neither intimidation or subjugation. Part of this panic when people are making grandiose claims, and that's what we're talking about here. People are making grandiose claims and promises that they sort of know that they're not going to have to live up to. Or maybe they'll have to live up to it once, and if it's one bad experience, they'll shut that shit down fast. Is that you need to be able to say, if I'm going to do this, if I'm going to write the 100 letters, I need to write the 100 letters. I don't stop at 99. If I am going to open my home, then I open my home to everybody. And I do it again and again and again, whether or not I get thanked, and whether or not I have to get Crest instead of Colgate, and whether or not I have to get a special bread, that how dare she want a special bread. I'm giving her my house. If we cannot do it in full measure, then we need to rethink doing it, because there is nothing worse. And I have said this in the Vox article in 2020. Asia Romano asked me, what is my biggest fear, or what am I fighting the most? And I said that white people in general, white women in particular, asking marginalized people what they need, nodding their heads like bobbleheads, and then not giving them what they want, or giving it to them in half measure, or deciding for them what they really want, was violence. I say that here too, exponentiated. And particularly for black and brown people, because most white people in their heads, when they're thinking about opening up their couches, they're opening up their couches to Amy and Inga. They're not opening their couches to Lupita. They're not opening their couches to Shaniqua. And we need to tell the truth about that. So when we talk about panic, we're also talking about a very specific kind of grandiosity that I am seriously urging and exhorting you against. So rather than panic, we need to learn how to take up our convictions with relentless reliability, just like I've been talking about for the last 5.5 years. The fundamentals are the same, y'all. The fundamentals are the same. Do the inside work first. Do it in tandem with outside praxis. Make sure that both are aligned, and don't stop. Don't stop. Don't stop. Don't stop. Don't visit violence on those who are already beaten down. Keep your promises. Be aware of the person you are, the person you want to be, and the person you say you want to be. Because it's one thing when the only person with skin in the game on this, while you're learning how to do these things, is you. The minute you go outward focused, now you're affecting other people. And you want to make sure that you're affecting them well, and with congruence, and with integrity. Tomorrow we're going to, or maybe even later on tonight, my 5 minute turned into 22. We're going to talk about point number 2, learning from black people. Basically the fundamentals, legal, intellectual, moral, ethical, have already been laid already. And what we see on Facebook and Instagram and all these other places are white people talking about reinventing a wheel that's already been made. Black people know about erosion of rights. I'm not going to say more about it right now. That'll be my little teaser for you to watch the next one. And then, of course, personalization versus depersonalization. That's going to be video number 3. And then bodily autonomy cannot be decoupled from full emancipation. That is going to be a tie-in to the Emancipation Juneteenth series. And lastly, the sword of unintended consequences, and this one I take very personally, and that one dovetails with the very last piece of the Juneteenth series, which is resistance of white people. At Lace on Race, we ask the questions that few other people ask in the ways that almost no one else asks. We ask that you support this, where you are going to get commentary and thought that's pretty well nigh different than anything you're going to get. If you want to continue seeing Lace on Race, do consider supporting us in tangible ways, as well as supporting us with your engagement and with your encouragement. And the last thing that I always say these days, and it is an homage to Hara, who is a Orthodox Jewish woman who I follow. If you are watching this to the end, go ahead and just give me a shout out. Give me a hello in the comments. It's always good to know that I am not alone, and neither are you. We are in some of the most important times that we have ever been. We've lived through COVID, and now we are going to have to walk through this crucible. We cannot do it alone. We cannot do it without discipline. We cannot do it without relentless reliability. And that is why Lace on Race is here. In fact, I can say, cribbing from Esther, we were made for such a time as this. We cannot afford smoking fury signifying nothing. We've got to make every single word every single emotion, every single action count. There are people who are depending on us. Those of us with enhanced capital, both social and economic. Those of us who are working class and are feeling the most under siege, because you are. Those who feel that they don't have any skin in the game, you do. This is the question I've been asking for the last 5.5 years, y'all, even before I founded Lace on Race. Who are you going to be? How are you going to tell this story to children and grandchildren 20 years from now? What are you going to be able to say that you did? Which means, if you're not sure of that answer, it's not an answer you'll like. So let's learn how to do it well, and let's move the needle in ways we never thought we'd have to move it. Panic does not move the needle. Conviction and persistence will. I love you. See you in the next video.